Our boys, another month, another soul raid, and here we are. This time around, we have Grave Digger, and you guys are not strangers to this boss. You guys have been doing this pretty much like almost every 5 days. So Grave Digger is the boss right now, and this boss has three faces, just like the original Special Interception, but they're very all similar to each other. And there's a few notes on here. Boss doesn't have any parts. Rocket launcher are not as great on this, and in particular the units that are good for this boss are units that have pierce, because the boss does have core and you can hit core shots, but you need to use pierce units. So Red Hood, Maxwell, Alice, Snow White are very good for this boss. And then another is shotguns are fairly effective to this boss, because if you don't have pierce, then just shooting the boss is very effective without like any core damages, and shotguns are one of the better units to hit. And then another thing is, unlike other solo raids, this boss doesn't really need a healer. So that's the good thing about it, is you can actually do the run without completely using any healers. So right off the bat, on phase 1 and phase 2, phase 1 and phase 2 are roughly similar. The boss does mini chip damages at the beginning up until the elemental shield comes up. Yeah, you can start covering if you do need to save some of the HP. Once the elemental shields comes up, that's around when the boss stops shooting at you. And then in phase 1 and phase 2 also, there's the QTEs, and you can actually fail them at least once, but you cannot fail them twice consecutively. So it's fine to do a fail and then successful and then fail and then successful on phase 1 and phase 2. You can alternate on that one. And it's actually a good thing to slow down on doing those QTEs, because delaying the QTEs will allow it to have you spend less time on phase 3. So phase 3 is where the boss starts moving around very fast. So that's why you want to avoid trying to spend too much time on phase 3. And in phase 1 also, the core is not as easily accessible. You cannot use aim assist on that boss to hit the core. It is recommended to turn off your aim assist settings, to turn this off, and you can actually hit the boss core during phase 1. So here's an example for it. So take a look at this, where we're using Snow White. This is during phase 1, around 2 minutes right here. And let me slow down. They're there. So it's a red damage text, so that's a core shot. It was actually also a crit, and it is located slightly below the drills. However, once phase 2 starts, you can actually just turn on aim assist. And what actually Mr. Kanto does on this example video is, after he did that, he actually turns the aim assist back on right here. And the good thing about that is, when you're bursting, it is actually rather easier for you to hit the core when you're using aim assist. So this one is, he's tracking the boss as it's moving, and right there, that's another core shot. So that's the main difference between phase 1 and phase 2 is that the core like aim assist. But for the most part, phase 1 and phase 2 does the same rotation of initially doing chip damages, and then there's going to be elemental shield, and then that elemental shield you need an iron element, and then after that is you just do the QTEs. Now for phase 3, it's different from phase 1 and phase 2, because the boss doesn't do chip damages anymore. And so this is also one of the reasons why you can just do it without any healer, because if you can survive phase 1 and phase 2 without needing a healer, then you're pretty much good for phase 3. Phase 3 also requires you to not fail any of the QTEs. When you do fail the QTE, it's pretty much GG, because the boss pretty much just one-shots you. And then another tip that I would want to point out is, if you are having trouble aiming, just enable the auto attack for you, and on the top left there's the auto attack, and that will help you out. The downside obviously is, if you're using any of the Pierce units, you're not going to be able to easily do pierce shots. Once you are on phase 2 though, it is a lot easier to do pierce shots, and this one is actually, I'm just letting the AI handle it, and it's actually really nice. All right, regarding the teams, there are basically 6 main teams that I can talk about. And on this sheet, you guys know already, I do constantly update this sheet with all the teams and whenever there's a new solar raid, so just check it out on the description. At anywhere in point where I do write down like flex DPS or something like that, or DPS, these are the main options I would say for this solar raid, and I'll update it if I do find some more. So just substitute these units to wherever the DPS is. And the team building for this boss actually rather have a lot of freedom on it, and people will have probably varying different teams depending on what the teams are, but there's like 6 main teams that I would say, but we can only really build 5. So let's start off talking about the 6 main teams. First things first is the Naga Tia, where the Pierce is, and there's a lot of synergy on this team with the Naga and Tia and D. Naga is giving core damage bonus, but then keep in mind also that in order to do core damage you need Pierce. So what you're trying to do here is units that have Pierce are the ones that are main options on it, and then on top of that, D does buff Pierce damages. There is a bonus on using Red Hood and Maxwell, for example, and also Alice. Snow White isn't a sniper rifle, so she's not gonna get the D's Pierce buff, but she is still getting Naga's bonus. Then another thing is you could totally replace, if you don't have Tia, you could put in Crown in here so to help. And there is a Crown plus Naga option also if you want to just front load your DPS in there, Crown Naga, and then have your other Pierce units in there with D. And then if you don't have Naga, Rupee is another option that combines with Tia, because Rupee does increase Tia's stacks, which helps with her cooldown. So that's just a side note if you guys don't have somehow like Naga. The second team would be the Infinite Ammo Crown team. This is pretty strict. Typically it's just Crown, Scarlet, Black Shadow, and Alice, and this has infinite ammo. That's the idea behind it, because of alongside with Crown's reload speed buff, alongside with Privity's buff, you just have unlimited ammo in here. So this is kind of like the most popular one, but then let's just assume that you don't have the other team 4 and team 5 that I'm about to talk to you with. Then you can start actually putting in the standard. You can put in Marciana here, which is an iron unit, and then you have the Summer Anise and Scarlet. So this does damage a little bit on the lower end compared to, especially when you compare it to this team, but at the end of the day, still it is a good team if you don't have the other teams available. And here are just like the common substitutes that I can show you to if you don't have any of the other units. Now let's start walking through the other teams. The bunnies in particular actually have 2 versions that I do visualize. One has the litter on it, and with litter you can actually just use any other DPS on that one, because litter is the iron, and that would be the one that would be dealing with the QTE. Pretty much for this team, if you're using like litter, or if you're using volume, then you need another iron unit, so you would need these units. And you can use Soline and Sugar, and actually I do have an example. Sugar and Soline can actually out damage Modernia, and if you have enough elemental damage on your Soline, it is totally possible to just out damage Modernia. This is, to be fair, this is a 474 Soline with like 60% elemental, but still, even then, you know, it's not like my Modernia is like super bad. Now another thing is you can actually just use Soda in here if you don't have Tove, for example. Some people are like concerned, okay, what would happen if you don't have Tove? Soda is completely usable if you don't have any other units that you can use. But another thing that a lot of people don't really talk about is with Soda and Tove, you could actually just use them also on the bunnies, and it actually is usable. So some people are kind of like neglecting it, but that is just one option that I can give you if you are kind of like running out of units to use. Just following up the shotgun bunnies team, you could totally just use the standard shotgun team, and there's actually a lot of flex. Let's say if you don't have, like, say Leona, you could totally just use Summer Helm, Guilty, or Dala. Those are other options also. And then if you don't have Tove, then you can use Volume or Miranda as options as well. And there is somewhat some synergy to that. She does buff critical damage and Leona buffs crit, so that's one thing to use. And it is very Soda oriented in terms of the damage output. And then the last spot is pretty much flexible for this shotgun team. Pretty much like you could use Alice or Summer Anise is another, especially if you did use the infinite ammo crown. Then you can actually have Summer Anise as free slot, so you would use this, or you could use Guilty as well. And then another option also is Summer Helm as just a standard debuffer. Summer Helm is just a very, very good debuffer for this raid, especially since the boss is weak against iron, and Summer Helm, that's where she shines. And then following the shotgun team is pretty much the final team. It's the Snow White team. There's many different variations of the Snow White team. One is the Snow White solo carry, and this is where your main damage dealer is Snow White and you try to match it with Yulha. And you can totally just use, instead of regular Helm, you can use Novel or like Polly as additional buffer, and it's okay because you do have another burst 2 here. If you're using Polly, you do have Summer Helm also, or Dala as your cooldown reduction, and that's with Miranda, which is like helping buff your Snow White. The other team for Snow White is that I have tested also is Litter and Novel team with Maxwell and Snow White, and this team works out really well in terms of their synergy because Maxwell and Snow White, their burst is within that 5 seconds, and you do have buff and debuff from Litter and Novel within that 5 seconds. One thing to note though is if you are using Litter with Snow White burst, you do need some charge speed on Snow White if you want to get the 1000 burst with Litter's buff. Otherwise, if you don't have any charge speed, you do want to release it at around 800 to like 900%, and make sure to do fast casting if you end up doing that. So that's a duo carry. And then the last spot is pretty much flex. You could use Yulha, you could use Summer Helm, Modernia, Ludmilla. Those are like other options as well. And then the final Snow White team that I did talk about before, I made a separate video on it, like on the about the previous solo raid. It is the crown with Yulha and Summer Helm with Snow White there, and that is like trying to line up crown's buff alongside with Yulha's buff and Snow White burst. So that is something that is good. Some genius out there are probably gonna figure that thing out. Actually, one other thing that I want to add on this, and I just edited it real quick, but you can actually use Tia if you don't have Naga. You can totally use Tia in here as your attack damage buffer. And obviously this is pretty much just a reflection of the original one here. And the difference is you're using Tia whenever Snow White's bursting. And now the last team is, this is pretty much like the crown version 2, and that is for the situation that you probably don't have like either a Snow White team. If you don't have a Snow White team, or you don't have like a full-fledged shotgun team, then that is an option of putting in crown separately from the infinite ammo team. You can end up using crown with Scarlet, Black Shadow, and Alice, and then the other units that could be used if you have like your Spirit Litter somehow, or Volume. And then the last slot is something like a healer for crown, or like additional buffers or debuffers like Summer Helm, or DPS, just you could use Modernia or Guilty, just an additional thing. That's basically the gist of the main 6 teams, and then I'll try to update anything else that I find on here. As usual, you just check it out. For any other units that are like leftovers, I'm gonna try to add it in here. So here's some example of the team combinations that you would have. So the most popular one right now on day 1 is having the Pierce units with the Tia, Naga, and then D, Red Hood, and Maxwell. And then you have litter here with the bunnies with Ludmilla and Modernia. And then the other one is the Infinite Ammo Crown team, and then the Shotgun team, and then the Snow White team. Now here's some alternatives. Let's say you don't have like either the Shotgun team or the Snow White team, or want to build something else, or don't have some new things. So here's an example of where I did use kind of like a half shotgun team. So you have the Tia Naga with Red Hood here and D. I put Ludmilla here because I was trying to use the double carry Snow White team. So this is an example where I'm using litter with Novel and then Maxwell and Snow White. And the last one was Yulha, but you could totally use like Modernia here. I ended up using the Marciana with Summer Anise and Scarlet in here, and then I did the Shotgun Bunnies team with Tove and then the Bunnies and Sugar in it, and then I have the Volume with Crown in it, Scarlet Black Shadow and Alice, and then the Summer Helm in here. So yeah, this is just one way to kind of rearrange it. Another example that I can give you where I rearrange some things, I have Crown with Modernia and Litter, and Scarlet Black Shadow and Dorothy with Summer Anise, and then just I used Sugar in here, but I could have used like Laplace, for example, or Rem plus Laplace. Volume in down here with Soline and Ludmilla, although this one damage was kind of like on the low end, so I think I probably would have like rearranged some things, maybe put Volume up here and then Litter down here. Yeah, there's just a lot of things. This is the standard Pierce team, and then the Shotgun team. And then another example that I could give you that's like Shotgun team. This Shotgun team doesn't have Alice in it, and it's using Summer Anise. In this situation, I used the Infinite Ammo on the Dorothy team down here. And then we have the standard. Actually, this is not the standard. This is actually Miranda with my Maxwell and Snow White, and the debuffer is actually both Novel and Summer Helm. And what I'm doing is I'm bursting with Novel because Summer Helm doesn't need to burst, and she is also the unit for cooldown reduction. And this is good because for people that don't want to use Yulha timeline, right? You guys don't want to use like time your burst with Yulha. That's an option that you guys can do. And then I have Litter with the Bunnies and Modernia in here with Sugar, and then the last one is the Red Hood with Ludmilla in Tianaga team. So those are just like examples. As you can see, there's like so many different ways you can just like flip-flop the units around. So yeah, everyone, each account will likely have different most efficient team because each account will have probably a higher like Red Hood, for example, or like a weaker Scarlet Black Shadow and that kind of thing. Or maybe you don't have like one of these units that will make it really good. You're gonna be flipping around, switching out different units. Say if you don't have Alice, you could probably use like Maxwell. But yeah, that's pretty much like the Gravedigger. Those are the main teams that I could think of, and also just the different variations and alternates. And again, I'll update this guide. If I have any additional notes, I'll try to update the tips section in here. So if you guys are looking, yeah, if you guys have any other suggestions also or questions, just feel free to let me know. But yeah, that's about it. Good luck to everyone, and I'll see you guys next time.